Well, Gail Barker, thank you for being a part of Temple Bound today. I'm excited about today's episode because you're not only someone who I look up to in terms of temple and family history, but you're also my mother-in-law.
Oh, and I love it. And the fact that you are my son-in-law is why I'm here. I don't know that I'd do this for anyone else.
Well, I'm so grateful that you're here. And the reason I felt so inspired to bring you into our podcast space was because you and I have always had a shared passion over temple and family history. And I thought, in this case, mostly on the family history side of things. You know, you and I have, obviously, we're related, so we have this common link now through your side of the family, but there's also this passion that we both share. Yeah. How long have you had your passion for the family history side of things?
You know, I would say it's been within the last 20 years. I didn't know anything about my family history before that. I didn't know anything. And as I began learning, it just opened up a whole new world for me.
Was there anything in particular, an event, or was it just kind of organic where it came out of nowhere?
I grew up in a home where my grandparents had the church and the gospel, but they didn't teach it to their children on both sides. And so my parents did not go to church. They didn't even hardly recognize that they were members of the church. When they got married, they said, "Where should we get married?" And one of them said, "I think I'm a Mormon." And the other one said, "I think I might be too." So when they did become active, I was about 10 years old. So I was on my own as far as learning about God and Jesus. So they didn't know much about their family history, I guess is where I'm going with that. And I didn't hear those stories. And probably the first time was when Mike and I were in St. George, and we were overlooking somewhere. And I stood there and I felt this tangible connection there. And I thought, what is this? What am I feeling? Anyway, as I started learning about my family history, I shared it with my parents, and my dad said, "Well, I know we have connections in Kanab." So I kind of started there. And then I found connections in Santa Clara, which is part of St. George, and then also Virgin City there that is also part of that. On both sides of my family connections there in southern Utah. And so then I started looking up journals, and my mom actually had gathered a lot, but hadn't shared much of it. Her grandmother gave her all the family history. Back then we didn't have, the computer and things, so it was all on paper. I started going through all of that and just learning, and I just felt like I knew these people and felt that connection. I felt like I understood myself better reading about them. And I found strengths in them that I felt like I had, or maybe I could have. And I just felt so connected. I'm not giving you time for questions.
No, this is great. You're doing a great job of just like sharing this. I'm really excited about this idea of the connection you have, because, you and I had a chance to have this discussion when we were together on vacation years ago.
Yes.
And you had mentioned something to me that really resonated about connection. You said, I saw things in ancestors that I didn't identify with my immediate nuclear family.
Absolutely.
And that's not, saying anything negative about that, but there were elements of who you were that just weren't transparently clear with the immediate family. So I would like to hear more about that.
Okay.
Like, what's the thing about, what were some of those things specifically that you saw with your ancestors? Like, what was the thing you're like, oh my gosh, that's me?
Thanks. That's kind of where I was going. So thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
And clarifying. I have 3 siblings, and I was always called the daredevil. I didn't feel like they were very adventurous, and my mom and dad kind of were, but I thought, how do I fit in here? And I loved learning. I loved education. I'm the only one that went and got my education that felt like it was a value. And there were just so many things that I felt were way different than my siblings. And sometimes I would even feel kind of I don't know, left out in a way because I didn't connect the same as they did and didn't feel like they did with me. As I learned about my family history, I thought, oh, that's where I connect.
What was it? How did that feel? Like when you felt like you didn't connect with your immediate family, and I'm guessing you were a young woman at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was that like?
Through adulthood.
Really? Because we never, that's the thing kids never understand. We still feel like we're 16 as we get older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always loved my siblings, but I just didn't feel like I was like them in every ways.
Yeah. In many ways, yes. But you're talking about some very distinct, core defining ways.
Goals, values, all of those things just seem to be different. And when I would read these stories of strength and just wanting to do better at any cost, being willing to do whatever it took, work hard enough, stay close to God and our Savior and turn to them and find strength there. I thought, okay, I know who I connect with now.
Yeah. And who is that? Do you have specific names of ancestors, or is it more just through the journey that you discovered?
Oh, no, I have several. There's several.
Okay.
See, I didn't even know I had pioneer ancestors. And I have lots on both sides of my family. And every new thing I would learn, I would just be, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
so I'll tell you one that comes to mind. I had to look at it this morning and make sure it was only my great grandmother on my mom's dad's side. So it would be Ethan's fourth great grandmother. Her family, when she was 3, were converted in Canada. And they decided to go to Nauvoo and live with the saints. And after they got there, cholera broke out and all of her family died. All of her siblings and her parents died. She was, I think, 5 when that happened. And so Emma and Joseph Smith took her in and raised her.
Wow.
And, we hear about how amidst their struggles, which we know are many, they took in other people and other children. And to think that my great-great-grandmother was one of those, I have such testimony, even more, of Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. I mean, to know that all that they went through, they had it in them to take her in. And I think, what did she learn from them? What did she see?
Yeah.
I looked it up again this morning. She was 11 when Joseph Smith was martyred.
Wow.
And living there with them. And she stayed there until she was 16. Then she went across to Salt Lake and lived with Brigham Young until she married. And so I think, what knowledge base and experiences did she have? And what strength did she have to hang in there? And then she married, and her husband helped build the Salt Lake Temple. And I don't know, it just goes on and on. And, when we drive through Kanab, there's a statue of Levi Stewart, who is my 3rd great-grandfather. I like to go there just to think about what he went through. He and 2 other of, my pioneer ancestors that I'm aware of, there might be more, were in the School of the Prophets with Joseph Smith. And I think, what were they taught? What did they experience? And they had such strength and fortitude and faith to do what they did. And living there in Nauvoo and losing everything and coming across the plains. And then Levi built a big house, and he would house all the pioneers that would come with nothing, and they would stay with him. He would take care of them until they were on their feet. I love that. And sometimes when I think life is hard, can I do this? I think I can't.
Wow. Thank you. It's so fun to hear you talk about those stories for me, because I know you so well and love you so much that you have this strength, and you almost individually to me are one who's not afraid to stand alone. I've really experienced that from a place of being in the family and seeing you do that. And I get it now. I mean, you have that connection. You're literally the blood descendant of these people who've stood and taken in others the way that you do. And I can only imagine when you were going through that stage of growing up and identifying who you were and seeing other people around you and looking for that connection, that's what you were able to find in your family history. It was like that connection of faith, that connection. And then even their stories of struggle seem like they've really sustained you during some really difficult times.
Yeah. And I believe that they are very aware of us and that they're there for us and that the veil is very, very thin. And I've had some experiences about that. And I just really believe that they're very aware and they're there. And I think, I don't even know if this is the right term, but I feel like not only do we have physical DNA, but there's almost a spiritual DNA. And again, that might not be the right term, but it's like it's handed down and we're given it from what they learned and struggled. And I just feel like that's passed along too.
It is.
Not just physical attributes.
I love that description of it. And it's interesting to me because as you're talking about it, unlike physical DNA, I believe as you're talking that spiritual DNA can be adopted in.
And that's exactly what I believe, Will.
Why do you believe that? I'm laughing because it was a leading question.
And I know why you asked. Yes, my two children are adopted, and I just feel that so strongly that they have that same spiritual connection with the ancestors, that it's theirs, that they have that. And I see that in them. I see that in my grandchildren. I mean, there have been some times when I have just been sure of it.
Yeah.
And I know that, and I've tried to pass along some of the family history, hoping that they would understand that and not think, well, that's not my bloodline.
Right.
It's more than that.
Well, and obviously knowing your two kids so well over
Yes.
26 years, they have it. The Gail love for adventure. Both of them are very adventurous. They're very solid in their faith. They're comfortable standing alone if they have to. And that, yes, you could argue they learn that, environmentally with you, but I know it the way you do it because it's more than just attributes. It's a feeling. It's a way you feel when you're around them. And I believe like you do. I think I want to get better at my scriptures and my conference talks quotes as we're doing this, because I remember reading that when we do work for people on the other side of the veil, when they're freed from the bondage of not having these ordinances, they are free to come over and act as angels for us. Yeah. And that thin veil becomes transparent. And that's why we're so passionate about the temple.
Yes.
We talk about temple and family history, and for a lot of people, they don't seem as connected, but that's the connection is when we can bring our family line through the temple, they serve as angels to help us on the other side of the veil to create literal miracles. You said something once that is a real illustration of what you just said, Gail. When we were going through a difficult time in our family and I was feeling hopeless, you just said, all we need is another miracle. And I think that comes from your spiritual DNA. I think that comes from the legacy of what you've chosen to believe and how you're spiritually, genetically inclined to act like the people who had the courage to cross the plains and, experience those difficult times. What's interesting too, Gail, as someone who's passionate about family history, you're also a counselor who has spent your entire life serving the youth of the world, of various countries, various faith. You're in an area in Boise where you get tons of people from across the world that are migrating in, immigrants and refugees, as well as locals and, people from seemingly, stereotypically perfect homes that are having their problems. How do you feel like family history would serve that population? And let me ask you, would it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it would for anyone.
Yeah.
To understand the strengths of your ancestors. I think we can come what President Nelson says is myopic, kind of just focusing on today and this is my life today. And I think family history opens it up to eternity. Wow. And we see this whole huge purpose and plan, and we connect to it.
Right.
And we're not just us trudging through this world anymore. So anyone, I think, would benefit from that. Absolutely.
Well, especially in today's world, you and I have also talked numerous times about how this generation, they've done studies on this. Suicide is up 3 times what it was in the last 10 years with young women because of social media connections. There's a disconnect occurring across the country, across the world, because when people don't identify with their family, if they don't have an immediate nucleus of friends that are able to feel supported, where do they go to numb? And where are they getting taught things? It's online, and they get this idea of, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. I think anyone listening has already bought into that concept. There's no reason to prove it. But I think what's worth mentioning is the connection between how this in the latter days, the whole family history temple work is being accelerated proportionally to the increase in social media and the alienation that's occurred to the youth. Yeah. And so I love that you've illustrated that as a young woman yourself. So how do you, as a grandmother, how do you help your kids and grandkids stay focused on these things? Because you can't push it on them. Right. It's this is something that is a thin line, I think. How do you inspire your family to get into family history and temple work?
Thank you for asking that. I really wanted to go there. I don't know whether to share this or not. I think I will, since we brought up adoption already. There was, and it didn't really have to do with that. It was a time when I was thinking, not so long ago, what is my purpose in my children's and my grandchildren's life? And I had prayed about it. And one time I went to the temple praying about it, didn't receive an answer until I was at the veil. Huh. And it hit me like a bolt of lightning. It was to teach them, and that they will have it for all generations of time and throughout all eternity. It really struck me. And I thought, wow, that's what we're here for, is to teach and be an example and to make sure that they understand what I feel and my testimony and what it has done for me. And that's really why I wanted to do this today. Yeah. I thought, here's a record. I've been told to do this, and this is an opportunity to leave a record of my testimony, my love for them. And it's so amazing to watch my children, which I include you and Carly, and teach your children. And through all generations of time, it just keeps going. And to watch my grandchildren and their strengths through their struggles and their amazing choices and what they choose to learn and become. And, it's just the biggest joy and comfort I could ever have, ever. And I just feel so blessed.
I hope I can share a little bit of our journey when we celebrated your birthday, when we had everyone in Utah. You said something then that I just thought would be so great to share. You were told once at a time that you wouldn't have kids. And then I'll never forget that. I think there's a handful of things that you've said over the years that have just ingrained into who I am, that spiritual DNA that you've put into me as an adopted member of the family that feels just as like I was bloodborne as well. And that's when you had, all these kids and grandkids at your birthday party, and you told the story of how you chose to follow the Lord and you felt comforted that you would one day have a posterity, and you just said, look what he did. And you have all these kids and grandkids that are there. And I don't think it's coincidental that you also, as a result of that, have this passion for family history, because I think for someone who maybe didn't have an opportunity to take it for granted, to have those things, and you were looking at your descendants, I wonder, and I would argue that it probably had something to do with why you had such an equal passion going the other way, going towards your ancestors. So since you said you wanted to do this as a way of leaving something of a message for your kids and grandkids, and I'm smiling because I know you, as of now, no one, we haven't launched the podcast, we're launching it next month. So as of now, there's no listeners except for your kids and grandkids.
That's good enough.
What would you like them to know about temple family history specifically?
I want them to know that their ancestors love them, that they're pulling for them, that they're there, that they might not know it, but they are there and they're pulling for them. And, we hear there's legions of angels, and I believe that. We have legions of angels that are there for us. And our families specifically, they know them. They want the best for them. They want to give them strength. And all we have to do is try to be aware of that and have faith and ask our Heavenly Father, to bless us, to see that, to feel that, to be able to accept that. And I just believe the veil is so thin. And I have felt that many times. So I want my children and grandchildren to know of my testimony, of my Heavenly Father, and of our Savior Jesus Christ. I know they love me, and I know they love them. And I know that because I've seen it and I've felt it. And I just want them to always have that peace and reassurance, and that's where it comes from. And that's the biggest joy there is. No matter what else we're looking for in life, that's the biggest joy there is.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Gail, for being on the show. I want to go on record just saying that I hit the jackpot when it comes to mothers-in-law. I don't consider you an in-law. I hate that phrase when it comes to you. You are dear to me. I am an adopted member of the family, and it doesn't matter. It means so much to me to be a part of it. So thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing that. We sure love and appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Will. And, I feel the same back. I just admire you all the time. And I know that's on record, right? All the time.
Your oldest grandson's listening to this.
All the time.
I love you too, Gail. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Temple Bound. If you enjoyed today's content, please leave a review and share the episode with others so that people who are looking for this information can find it. Thank you again for listening. Until next time.